And 3, 2. So good morning again for the Athens Karma Thegsum Chöling Center. I want to thank Stephen Kropf and all of the members of the organizing committee for the Athens KTC. Thank you so much for inviting me here to come and help out with some, a little bit of a, I guess we could call it a weekend retreat or a Saturday retreat on the topic of shamatha meditation. I'm very happy to be part of your learning process, and I'm looking forward to talking with you today. Just a quick reminder, you can ask questions in chat, and I'll stop every so often and look at the questions that are in chat. So the topic today is the 9 stages of shamatha. Actually, it's about ripening your shamatha, but I'm using that as a way of talking about a larger subject, which is the subject of the 9 stages of shamatha. This is a teaching system that helps people remember and know where they are in their own meditation practice. So before I get started on all of these things, I would like to take a moment to a quiet moment to ask everybody to be together in prayer today. And so we're going to offer prayers and goodness for all beings around the earth. I'm going to start by reciting a short prayer in the Tibetan language, which is the prayer of taking refuge and engendering the Bodhisattva motivation. And then I'll repeat that prayer in English. If this is a prayer with which you are familiar, you can kind of join in. If this is a prayer with which you're unfamiliar, you can join in your heart and in your mind, thinking that you dedicate this session to the benefit of all beings. O Sanje Chudon Soji Chonamla Jangchu Pardu Dani Kyapsuche Daji Jinsoji Pe Sunamki Drola Penshi Sanje Druparsho. In the Buddha, his teaching, and the order most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may we attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Now, the short prayer called the Four Immeasurables. May all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they have that great happiness, which is freedom from suffering. May they dwell in great equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. And lastly, a prayer to the lamas of the lineage. O Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Tagi Chiwar Pede Den Chola Kadrin Chembo Koneche Sante Kusum Taging Udrup Sal Duso. Okay, thanks very much. So the first practice that most people learn when they come to their Buddhist center, and the first practice that they do in their Buddhist practice regimen, is the practice of calm abiding. And this practice of calm abiding is it's called by many names. It can be called shamatha. It can be called shine. Shamatha is the Sanskrit name. Shine is the Tibetan name. Let's see if I can put these into chat. Shamatha is the Sanskrit one. Shine is the Tibetan one. Tranquility is the English one, but it can also be called calm abiding. Shi means peace, and ne means abiding. So abiding in peace, shi ne. And it's the same meaning of the word shamatha. So whatever name we give to it, quiet sitting meditation is how most of us begin our career, if you want to call it that, as Buddhist meditators. It's the most basic practice taught by the Buddha as part of his Eightfold Noble Path from confusion to wisdom. And so this Eightfold Noble Path takes us from a place of confusion in our lives to a place of wisdom. And it does so by carrying us through several different practices of self-awareness, being aware of our body, being aware of our speech, being aware of our mind. And by cultivating awareness of our body, speech, and mind, we can first start to work with the confusion we feel in life by slowing everything down. Most of the reason that people feel tossed and turned by their lives and feel out of control in their lives is because everything is moving much too fast. Our thoughts move quickly, our bodies move quickly, we speak quickly. Everything is quick, quick, quick. And I think that what happens is because everything is moving so quickly, we feel pressure from outside of ourselves, from the people we associate with, our families, our work. We feel pressured to do, be, and, to do everything and to try to be part of everything. The modern phenomena of FOMO, fear of missing out, is another aspect of this roiling confusion that we experience in our everyday life and thought. And it's even more so now that we have social media and the internet and computers, because our machines are going faster and faster and faster. And as human beings, we must have a competitive streak because we're trying to speed up too. And so as a result, we often don't really even know what's on our minds until something that we regret comes out of our mouths. We don't even know what we're thinking, and already something comes out of our mouths that we then later regret. And so this is, for many of us, this was my reason for wanting to learn to meditate. And so when I learned meditation, it was for me a moment of relief because I didn't have to go that fast anymore. All I had to do was work with my quick thoughts. And so the discipline of shamatha meditation allows us to slow everything down. And once we begin to slow everything down, we can begin to make better choices with our attention and with our energy. Because our body, speech, and mind contain a lot of potential. We have the potential to do many great things. And we have the potential to be of great benefit, both to ourselves and others. We have the capacity for great love. We have the capacity for great wisdom. And yet, because of our roiling, boiling minds, we often don't have the opportunity to bring ourselves to bring all that potentiality to fruition. We just don't have the situation for it. So shamatha creates a safe space for us to quiet down and to slow down. And so that's the she part of she ne. And the ne is the next part that we learn. Because once we sit down and start the practice of meditation, we begin to understand that there is a little technique involved. We don't just sit down and instantly know how to meditate. We might actually be able to sit on the side of a river and watch leaves go down the river. We might be able to do that. But pretty soon, because of our quick minds that are always roiling and boiling, we're going to try to create stories about those leaves and make believe of what's going on in that river, and then be nowhere near paying attention to the moment. So this is why there's a little bit of technique involved. And so we learn the techniques of meditation. We learn the techniques of meditation in this way. We go to a teacher of meditation who hopefully has received a lineage of teaching of shamatha. And from that teacher who's received the teaching of the lineage of shamatha, we receive the instructions. The instructions for shamatha meditation have been handed down for 2,500 years, and they come directly from the teachings of the Buddha. And so remember I said at the beginning, we have a body, we have speech, and we have mind. And so what shamatha does is it brings calm abiding, or shi-ne, or shamatha, to our body, speech, and mind. And so I'm going to start by reviewing the basic posture for meditation, and we'll do a little bit of meditation together. And after that, I'll take your questions about basic meditation technique and posture. And so if you have any questions that you've wondered about meditation technique and about meditation posture, you can type them into chat. And but also I will be having people unmute their microphones on the Zoom presentation in order to ask questions verbally. We'll do that in just a few minutes. But here at the beginning, I want to start with the instructions. The instructions, which you've maybe received many times, that I'm going to give today come from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, the founder of the Athens KTC. And he was also my teacher, and he passed away a few years ago. So I feel every time I give this instruction that I'm sort of invoking his presence and warmly remembering how good it felt to be a beginning meditator all those years ago, learning how to do shamatha meditation from him. So, the posture of meditation, you can do meditation in lots of different settings. You can meditate in a chair. You can meditate lying down. You can meditate sitting on the floor. And all of these methods of meditation are useful. I've talked to a number of people who, because of physical difficulties, cannot meditate in the conventional way, sitting up. They actually have so much back pain or so much other types of pain that they have to meditate lying on the floor. Now, there is a bit of a problem with this, and that sometimes instead of meditating, you'll fall asleep. But as one of my other meditation teachers, His Eminence Tai Situ Rinpoche, said, falling asleep in meditation, not the worst thing that could happen. So I want people not to feel judged if when you meditate, you fall asleep. So let's talk about posture in a chair. If you're sitting in a chair, you know how chairs are designed. There's a back, there's a seat, and there are the legs. When you sit in a chair, you try to sit so that your spine is somewhat straight in the chair. For some people, that means actually sitting closer to the edge of the chair than it means sitting with your back up against the chair. But as they say in car commercials, your mileage may vary. So, but then you might actually have to sit a little closer to the edge of your chair in order to put your feet flat on the floor. So your feet should be flat on the floor in front of you, about the distance hip width apart, because your hips also will vary. So you can place your feet flat on the floor. And so you have that nice perpendicular profile as you sit in your chair. And when you're sitting in a chair, your hands can be placed palm downward on the tops of your legs. I know that in pictures, the Buddha is shown sitting with his hands cupped, left on the bottom, right on the top, with the thumbs touching. This is not easy to do, either in a chair or on the floor. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said that the reason for this, the reason that this is not easy, is because not all of us have the right proportions of our torso to our arms. Our torsos may be shorter and our arms may be longer, and so forth and so on. So for that reason, he taught his meditators to use the posture that was actually popularized by the Tibetan master, Marpa the Translator. Marpa the Translator, who lived in the 1000s, no, a little later than the 1000s. I think he lived in the 1100s. He taught meditation with the hands resting palm downward on the legs, so that if you're sitting in a chair or sitting on the floor, you have some support for your upper body from just your hands being palm downward on the legs. So either one of these postures are acceptable. Now, that's a little bit about sitting in a chair. You sit close to the edge of the chair if that helps you keep your spine straight. And by straight, I don't mean like an arrow. I mean, it has its natural curves in it, but you're not hunched over and you're not like this, overarched. And in fact, I had a friend who's a yoga teacher who said, if you want to know whether your spine is straight, whether you're sitting in a chair or sitting on the floor, the way to do it is to hunch over so that you know what bad posture feels like. And then overarch your back so you know what that feels like. And then take a few degrees off of the arch until you feel comfortable. And that's going to be your spot. So that's a little bit about how to sit in a chair. Next, sitting on the floor. When you sit on the floor, everybody needs a cushion. No question. You can't sit flat on the floor. It's very difficult and it's hard on your backside. So Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, when he first taught meditation, he said, oh, the ideal should be that you have a cushion that's about 4 finger widths high. Well, he didn't count on Americans who grew up not being floor sitters, who need cushions maybe twice that big in order to start out their meditation. So once again, your mileage may vary, and you may need to have a different size cushion for yourself. I had to start with a higher cushion, and I eventually got to one this size, but it took a very long time. So when you sit on that cushion, then you begin with the position of your legs. Now, if you're sitting in a chair, it's pretty simple. Your legs are just feet flat on the floor. But when you're sitting on the floor, you can use any one of several techniques. I'm going to use my visual aids here of this. These are my knees. These are my hips. So you get an idea of how things work. You can sit with your legs crossed lightly in front of you like this. Some people who have the capacity for and then that way, your knees are on the same level as your hips. And never sit this way with your knees way up above your hips. It's really hard on your hips and it hurts. So it's better to slowly work down to the place where your knees are at the same level or slightly below your hips. So yeah, those of you who have yoga teachers, go to them and say, okay, how do I train my body to be able to sit in a comfortable position so that my ankles don't fall asleep? Because when you sit like this, sometimes your ankles will fall asleep. But you can remedy that by putting a rolled towel under this part of your knee, and that will be a cushion that will take some of that pressure off your ankles. So that's a little bit of elementary sitting ideas. You know, the hips and the knees should be in a relationship to one another, and so that the knees are either at the same level or slightly below the hips. And you can sit cross-legged like this. You can sit cross-legged like this, you know, where one foot is in front of the other. You can do it either way. There are differences between them, but I won't go into that now because it takes a lot of time to talk about. You can read about it in Dharma Paths. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche talks about it there. Another way you can do is you can sit in what's called the half lotus posture with one foot up, this one, or maybe this one. But and those of people who are athletes can sit in the what's in yoga called the full lotus posture, where the left foot is put on the right thigh, and the right foot is put on the left thigh, and you kind of look like a human pretzel. Khenpo Rinpoche said, this is the ideal posture for people who want to sit like this, who want to sit with their hands cupped. He said, this is the ideal posture for that, because look, you've got a spot to rest your, hands right there where your legs cross, where they cross each other. You can just put it right down on there. But I can't sit like that. So you're not going to see me sitting like this anytime soon. I will be using Marpa the translator's method. If it worked for him, it will work for me. So that's a little bit about the seat and the legs. One more thing about the seat. When you sit on your cushion, Khenpo Rinpoche said that you can rock from side to side, tucking in the muscles of your backside and momentarily tightening the muscles in the lower part of your body and then relaxing them. He said this grounds you on your seat like a mountain. You get grounded. So, so that's the legs and the seat. And we've already talked about the back, how it needs to be straight, but not hunched. And the shoulders, hands, and arms, the hands can be palm downward on the legs. Now, where they land on your legs is going to differ. Again, because some people have longer arms and some people have shorter arms. Next, the head. What are we going to do with the head? Because if you're sitting straight, your head should be comfortable. But one of the things you can do to help is tuck your chin in slightly, which you can feel that straightens out your neck vertebrae. Next, the gaze. What do you do with your eyes? Now, I'm extremely nearsighted. And for me, when my eyes are open, I get really distracted. So Siddha Rinpoche told me that because I overfocus because of the glasses that I have to wear, he said, it's fine for you to close your eyes lightly, but you could fall asleep. So that is one option. But the other option is to sit with your eyes lightly open. And what you're doing is you're gazing at an area a few feet ahead of you. And the only words I can use to describe this is that you're not looking at a point. You're trying to allow your gaze to be diffuse. It's like you're taking in the whole picture without focusing on anything. So that's about the eyes. And then finally, if you have some tension in your jaw, this will help you. You can take the tip of your tongue and touch it to the roof of your mouth, behind the front teeth, and then flatten it. And what that will do is it will reduce the amount of saliva and the amount of swallowing you have to do. But it will also relax the muscles of your face and take the tension out of your jaw. So it's a little bit of an effort to do, but it does provide a benefit. So there we have it. We have sitting in a chair, and then we have sitting on the floor. Your seat, your legs, your back, your shoulders, hands, and arms, the gaze, the head, the gaze, and the tip of the tongue. So these are the 7 points of posture. I think I got all 7. And once you place your body in this position, that gives you a foundation for the placement of your attention or the placement of your mind. Once you've placed your body in the position, then you place your mind. You think and reflect on your intention and motivation. This is very important. So then, thinking about your motivation, there are many we could have, such as, I really need to chill out right now, or that you just need a little relief. But you could also have as your motivation, the motivation to be a benefit to yourself and others. That's, I guess you could say that would be the ideal motivation. And so you foster that motivation thinking, I will meditate for the next few minutes for the benefit of myself and all beings. After the physical and mental preparation, you begin the practice. The practice begins, and this is according to the teachings of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, with one deep breath, breathing in through the nostrils if possible, and your mouth if you're congested. Allowing the breath to feel like it's falling below the navel, and then breathing out again. And then allowing the breath just to be natural. The breath comes and goes naturally. And in fact, you can even follow the course of the breath as it goes in and goes out. There are a couple different ways to practice awareness of your breath. You can practice awareness of the breath as it comes in and as it goes out. You can feel it as it comes in. You can feel it as it goes out. And what you do is you place your attention with the breath as it comes in, and you place your attention with the breath as it goes out. Some people can even add to this by mentally counting the breath. In breath, out breath. Mentally count 1. In breath, out breath. Mentally count 2, and so on. And by doing this basic practice, we practice placing our attention on an object. But that's not all. We have one more little technique to learn, and that is the technique of working with thoughts. What do we do when a thought arises while we are trying to attend to and be present with our breath? What do we do? And I think the best way of describing this is the way that Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche described this in one of his teachings. He said, you practice touch and go. He called it touch and go. I call it touch and let go for a reason, and you'll see in a minute. When we're sitting and meditating, what we'll get when we first start is a short period of attention. We will be attentive to the breath for a short time. And then something will happen. Maybe the car door slams outside. Maybe the telephone rings. Maybe somebody speaks in another room. Or maybe your mind thinks, what is on my agenda for this afternoon? Whatever these things are, they're all distractions from the practice of attending to the breath. And they have to be worked with. We can't just pretend they're not happening. So what you can do with them is note them. You can make a note that they're there. You can actually move your attention from the distraction, take one step back from it and say, I'm distracted right now. And you can label it thinking, whatever it is, and let it go. And then return your attention to the breath. And think of that as a fresh start. Noting it, labeling it thinking, letting it go, and returning to the breath for a fresh start. And then you reestablish your attention on the breath, which again will last for a short period of time, which will then be followed by another period of mental wandering. And then you do the same practice. You notice it, you let it go, and then you consciously return your attention to the breath. And you may do this a lot. You could do it 60 times a minute. I don't know, but the fact of the matter is that this actually is the powerful moment in meditation. The power of meditation is not in the actual calm abiding where you're just resting in meditation. The power is in noticing and letting go of distraction. Noticing, letting go, and returning. Noticing, letting go, and returning. By doing this over and over again, you strengthen the muscles of your attention, and you allow those muscles to develop gradually. And I know it's kind of silly to call them muscles, but you get my meaning, which is that we're strengthening our capacity to notice and to be aware of our breathing. And by being aware of our breath in the present moment, we're learning how to be present. This is what calm abiding means. Calm abiding means to be aware of something and to remain aware of something, and then to return our attention when it wanders. So we're going to do a little bit of meditation right now. And then after that, I'll take questions. Now I notice already that there's already a question in chat, and there will be time for more questions in a bit. But at least I wanted to get started with just a short session, and this will probably only be a few minutes. So what we'll do is, again, review, placing the body in the posture of meditation, reflect on your motivation, take one deep breath, breathe out, and then allow your attention to rest on the breath as it comes in and goes out. You can use counting if you like it, and not if you don't. So we'll just sit now for just a few minutes to practice this. Okay. That's a few minutes of meditation. And to the person who I just let in from the waiting room, sorry you had to wait. I was meditating. In any event, I'm ready to discuss a little bit if people have questions. I'm going to look at chat first, and you can make a note of any questions you have. If you have any questions about meditation and the technique, you can put them into chat. And if not, just hang in and you'll have a chance to ask question on audio in just a minute. Here's the first question. Can you speak about how much time one should meditate? Is there an optimal amount of time? I remember talking to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche about this, and he said the goal of all meditators is to be able to place your attention on an object, in this case, the breath, and to leave it there as long as you want. This is going to take some time. Of course, that's the goal of all meditators, to be able to place your attention on an object and leave it there as long as you wish. So, but it's good. That's not immediately where we are as practicing meditators. So we have to gradually build up to that. Khenpo Rinpoche said that he felt that he wanted me to explain to people that there are two kinds of meditators, and that those two kinds of meditators will actually have different protocols that they will need to follow in order to develop in meditation. The first kind of person, they don't have names, 1 and 2, the first kind of meditator, when they first sit down, everything is smooth. It's so easy to follow the technique, no problems following the technique. Oh, it's easy. And then the longer they sit, the more disorganized it all becomes. Rinpoche said this person should sit for shorter periods of time and more frequently in order to get in some meditation time. They should sit for shorter periods of time. In other words, they should not sit so long that they become frustrated by the breakup of their technique. So what this would mean, I'm actually in this category. So I sit and meditate for shorter periods of time, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then everything really starts falling apart. And sometimes even within the 10 or 15 minutes, it'll fall apart, and then I'll just take a break, stretch a bit, and then sit and then settle my mind down again with a deep breath, and then following the breath. And so I'll have what's called what I call a mini session in the middle of a 10-minute session. I might have 2 or 3 little mini sessions. So I'm from that first group, but there's a second group. And that second group, when they first sit down, everything is wild, and it's here and it's there and it's everywhere, and it's like totally chaotic. But the longer they sit, the more it settles. And so that person should sit for a longer period of time in order to get past the chaos and frustration and get to a place where they feel that they are doing the technique and able to follow and do the technique. So I don't think there is an ideal time for a meditator. I think the ideal time is whichever one of these two you are. If you are the meditator who starts out good, but then it breaks up, make sure you sit more than once a day for a short period of time, so that you feel that capacity and that lack of frustration. And then if you're the other kind of meditator who needs longer to get to a place where you feel that you have the technique in hand, then I would sit for a longer period of time. And so I think the ideal that Rinpoche is setting out for us is to be able to eventually sit for as long as we want. but that's going to take a while. But I like it that he gave us strategies for the two types of meditators. And you might be actually one that goes between those. I've actually met people like that too. Does that answer your question about the ideal time? Oh, she's nodding. Okay, thank you. So here's another one. Is there a written explanation of the pictorial handout depicting the 9 stages? Yes, there is. And I decided not to share it, but I will when the class is over. I have a handout that explains all parts of the 9 stages. But what I've noticed, and I've heard this from other presenters, is that when you give people a very long and detailed handout, they will actually spend the entire time reading the handout and they won't hear the instructions. So that's why I started with just the labeled illustration. And what will happen is that if I get lucky and if everything comes together, I'll be able to put the explanation into chat. If not, I'll make sure that somebody at KTC has it so they can hand it out by email tomorrow. So yes, there is written explanation. You can find a short, like 1 page explanation in this book, Luminous Mind by the previous Kaldu Rinpoche. It's just 1 page. And that's what I'm going to be partially basing my remarks on today, because it's the shortest and most succinct. So here's another one. Is calm abiding shamatha practice practiced by all forms and lineages of Buddhism? I believe it is. There are different techniques of calm abiding. For example, in the Theravadan tradition, the Insight Meditation Society of Barre, Massachusetts, they practice a type of shamatha that is an awareness of bodily sensations, and that's the method they use. They call it Vipassana, or insight, which is the other half of the pair, because there are 2 types of meditation: shamatha and vipassana. Shamatha is tranquility, which allows the mind to come to rest. And then vipassana is insight, meaning that one uses the mind itself as the object of meditation. And by using the mind itself as the object of meditation, one gains insight into the nature of mind. These two disciplines help each other. Different lineages of Buddhism teach them in a different order. In the Theravadan tradition, Vipassana is introduced much earlier. And in fact, the organization using the term Vipassana to describe their version of shamatha is purposeful, because it's a united double discipline. But the Tibetans prefer to teach them in 2 parts: shamatha first and vipassana second. And as we will see when we go over the 9 stages of shamatha illustration, vipassana, from the Tibetan point of view, is a product of good shamatha, and actually will begin to arise in the midst of good shamatha. But there are, in the different Tibetan traditions, actual vipassana instructions, and they come in instruction books. And in our tradition, the tradition of the Athens KTC, the first name of our center is Karma, second name is Thegsum, third name is Chöling. Chöling means Dharma place. Thegsum means the 3 vehicles of Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, which indicate the 3 styles of meditation we do. Shamatha is our Hinayana practice. Tonglen is our Mahayana practice. And the meditation on mantra and Mahamudra are our Vajrayana practice. And so, but the karma part of our name means that we come from the karma Kagyu tradition. And in the karma Kagyu tradition, we practice a style of meditation called Mahamudra. And Mahamudra meditation is a practice of tranquility and insight, or shamatha and vipassana, that start out being separate, first learning shamatha techniques, then learning Vipassana techniques, but eventually the two are merged together, that this is how Mahamudra is taught. First we learn shamatha, then we learn Vipassana. But not all Buddhist lineages teach it like that. Many of them teach it at the same time. The Zen tradition of Japan and China is also a similar practice where shamatha and Vipassana are not quite taught at exactly the same time, but they're similar. They have an integration of them in a specific way. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I hope so. We're at the top of the hour, so let me get a couple more questions in before the break. May I use a sacred word to transition from the distraction back to the breath? Well, you know, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche did not teach that. So I can't say that that is a Tibetan Buddhist tradition. I just can't say that. So, but if thinking of a word like peace or labeling the thought thinking, and then returning, you can do it. I think since the method coming from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche uses a label and then letting things go and returning, I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't use a sacred word as long as that word doesn't spark more thinking. Because sometimes if a person thinks of specific words, then that word takes them off into a different direction of distraction because they feel it causes a feeling. So I'll let you be the judge of which word is the best one for you to use. I actually still use thinking after all these years. And but eventually you don't need the word anymore. You just notice and return. And in my own meditation, I have had periods where I've just noticed and returned without a word. And I think it's a natural progression. So there you go. I am able to sit on the floor for long periods if I can stretch one leg out for a few. That it is not proper to point your feet toward the shrine. Yeah, that's actually true. It isn't in the Tibetan tradition, especially. They find that to be bad manners, and I found out eventually. I eventually found out why that is. It goes all the way back to Indian Buddhism, and that sometimes when Indian Hindu teachers would bless their students, they would put their hands out like this and bless them. And if you wanted a double blessing, the teacher would put their feet toward you as well as their hands. And this carried over into Indian Buddhism. And so for us to sit and think we're going to give a blessing to the shrine, it's a little unseemly. We're not enlightened beings yet, so we can't bless anything. So this is part of the reason why it's considered bad form to place your feet toward the shrine. What I've seen people do in shrine rooms is I've actually seen them turn to the side a little bit in order to do that. I've seen people do several different what they feel are personal workarounds. I honestly have not asked one of the Tibetan teachers how to handle this. So, but I'll try to remember to ask them to get like a definitive Tibetan answer. But what I've seen people do is I've seen them turn slightly to one side where they're not putting their feet towards something in order to stretch their leg out. I also have stretched my leg out. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. And another thing that some people do is that they cover their foot with a shawl or something like that, so that it's not obvious that. So I will check with the Tibetans to find out what the proper etiquette is. But thanks for asking about that. There's two more questions, and then we'll take our break. Is there any instruction regarding the duration of the inhale and exhale? I feel like in a natural breath cycle, the bottom of the exhale has a pause. Not sure totally what to do with that moment or whether to shorten my breath a bit. No, Catherine, just let the breath be natural. Don't try to do anything with it. I think that what you're explaining in your question is actually what is happening for absolutely everybody anyhow. But we're not trained to notice things this closely. And so since we're not trained as children to notice things this closely, or in our lives, we're not trained to notice these things. When we suddenly notice them on the cushion, it's like a revelation, like, oh, hey, wait a minute. But the fact of the matter is, this is exactly what happens in breath, instantaneous pause, out breath. I mean, so yeah, it's there. And noticing it is enough. You don't have to do anything, actually. There's nothing to do. I really don't think, because trying to adjust that, just leave it as it is. There is a tradition among Tibetans of using a mantra with the breath: Om, Ah, and Hum, or Hum. There is a tradition of doing that, where the in-breath is Om, that second is Ah, and that 1 second, it's not even a second in most cases. Om, Ah, Hung. And so they'll use that. But I tell people that this is really hard, and sometimes it actually makes people over-aware of their breath and they get claustrophobic. I mean, let everything be natural. Just let everything be natural. Don't force anything, because I think that's where we run into trouble. Because remember that roiling, boiling mind? Guess what's at the bottom of that roiling, boiling mind? They call it ego fixation. We're busy thinking about ourselves. How am I doing? Am I doing it right? How's it going? Am I getting enlightened yet? I mean, so we have this roiling, boiling mind, right? And anything that increases the roiling, boiling mind is kind of a problem. And that includes, I wonder if I can do this new cool thing I just read about in chat, and then we get all excited, and then we try to, and then things go bad. So, I'm telling you about it because actually Khenpo Rinpoche, when asked this question, actually has in the past mentioned this. And I toyed with the idea of not mentioning it, but for completeness, I'm adding it. But I also do want to add that proviso that if it makes things worse, don't do it. So thank you for that. Then the final question before the break: how would you suggest getting started in Tibetan Vipassana? Well, I really am glad you asked about this, because there's a little thing called, I'm going to put that in the chat. There's a little thing called lineage. And to me, that's the best way to learn Tibetan Vipassana. It's the absolute best way, is to learn it from a person who has genuinely received it as a teaching from their teacher, has practiced it, and has been given permission by their teacher to give it to other people. That is the absolute best. So the steps are: step 1, find a genuine teacher, which in order to find them, you question them about who their teacher was and how much experience they have in teaching Tibetan Vipassana, and find out who their teacher was, find out what their lineage is, then decide whether you want to take instruction from them or not, and then begin to work with them. I think that's the step. And then the first step is find a genuine teacher and then begin to work with them. Because it really is, to learn it properly, it's a one-on-one thing. It's so much. If you try to learn it out of a book, I've talked to several people who've tried to teach them this stuff out of a book, and it just doesn't work. And then remember that roiling, boiling mind that is run by ego fixation? People get so ambitious, like, well, I don't need a teacher. I can learn it myself. And I got this book, and this book is going to teach me how to do it. And the problem with that is, guess who's in charge? Ego fixation is in charge, right? Our ambition to do something that we don't need instruction for is like in charge. So what we have to do is kind of set that aside and actually kind of like humble ourselves just a little bit and go to a teacher and say, could you give me this instruction? And because what my teacher said to me was that it's much more powerful to get these teachings one-on-one from a real person. Because basically a book will never tell you when you're making a mistake in your meditation. And in fact, one of the things I'm going to try to talk about this afternoon is mistakes that you can fall into in meditation. It's in my little handout. I'm going to try to talk about those today. And then that's good. But if you want information about how Tibetan teachers work with their disciples, I'm going to say there's a new book by Mingyur Rinpoche called In Love with the World. And he's a great meditation master, genuine teacher. You won't go wrong if you connect with him. And his name is spelled like this. He gives his account of his working with his own teacher and so forth. He talks about his own life. But another thing to do would be to meet a teacher and talk with a teacher about the process, because Mahamudra is a great practice and it has two phases. It has preliminaries and it has an actual practice. So then if you meet a teacher, the teacher will work you through the Mahamudra preliminaries and then teach you the actual practice one-on-one, lesson by lesson at a time. So I hope that helps you with your question about learning about Tibetan Vipassana. But there's a couple of, there's one other place you can go to learn about it. And let's see here. Go to www.rinpoche.com, click on teachings, click on Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings. He has a great book that's he has Introduction to Meditation, but he also has something called Introduction to Mahamudra. But again, I caution you against trying to practice it out of the book. Find a human being and have them help you. But Trungpa Rinpoche's little booklet, I mean, this thing is tiny, will give you an introduction to how the system works. He also, can anybody remember the name of Trungpa Rinpoche's most recent book on the Karmakaju lineage supplication? Anybody remember the title of that? I'll look it up during the break and let you know. But Michael, I am so glad you asked about this, because this is a fantastic subject and I'm glad you have that interest, and I'll get you that book title after the break. So this is where we'll stop for our 5-minute break. Feel free to get up and move around the cabin. And when we get back, we'll talk about I'm going to teach 2 systems of evaluating your meditation. One is called the 4 Stages of Shamatha, and then there's another called the 9. So we'll talk about the 4 as soon as we get back from break. So thank you. I'm going to pause the recording and we'll see you in a bit. Okay, so we are back from the break, and I wanted to answer Barbara's question. So thank you very much for asking that question about the mind. Barbara's question was about the touch and let go technique, where we label something thinking, drop it, and then return to the technique. Well, what if instead of one discrete thought, you've got a jumble, lots going on, lots of thoughts? Like, how do you work with that? And again, I want to make sure I think I have your question right, Barbara. So let me give you what I think, and then you can tell me whether that works with your understanding of things. I actually do think that this is what happens for most of us, is that when we are watching the breath or observing or attending to the breath, whatever you want to call that technique, when we're attending to it, lots is going on in the background. And it may not bubble up to the level of our attention, but it's in the background, but it's bubbling, but then it bubbles up, and we may not actually even be able to identify it as a discrete single thought. Yeah, it might just be a jumble. So what we do in that case is the same thing. Doesn't matter whether it's one thought or many thoughts jumbled. we make a note of it, like, okay, there's the jumble. There's the jumble. And that's not what I'm attending to right now. And so then you let go of your attending to the jumble and you return your attention to the breath same way. I really do appreciate you bringing this up, because I think that for most of us, that's how our minds are. It's kind of a jumble, it's kind of a jumble. And one discrete thought may not pop up and say, hi, I have a discrete thought, hi, and then we can label it. So whatever you're, and this is also true, because sometimes what's happening is not thought as much as it is a perception that gives rise to a thought. The example I use frequently is the example of meditating, and then you hear a car door slam outside your window. Sometimes when you're sitting there and you hear that door, you just kind of, for a second, your attention is to it, and you kind of like, oh, that's a car door. But then you immediately can go back to the technique, like nothing happened. That happens sometimes. But then there are other times when just hearing the car door or hearing a bird sing or whatever leads to a whole storyline. Like in the car example, it's like, oh, is that my neighbor? Is he parking in my space again? I told him not to do that, And there's a jumble for you, right? It started with the slamming of the door, just a mere perception. And then it turned into this whole big rigmarole. So what we have to do is, no matter where we are in the process of the rigmarole, whether we're at that instant when we hear something and it takes our attention away, or we think something, regardless, we let it go. We note its presence, we let it go, and we return. Does that answer the question for you, Barbara?
Yes, very well.
Okay.
Very well.
No, I appreciate
perception into it.
No, I really do appreciate this, because when one person has a question, at least 2 other or 3 other people have the same question. So yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to turn off microphones for just for a bit, and then continue the presentation. One of the things that I wanted to touch on, and I really appreciated the questions because they helped us to sort of crystallize this, is that learning meditation is a process. We don't start out knowing the technique, and we don't start out being proficient at the technique. So what we have at the beginning is a lot of start and stop. Sometimes we have moments of proficiency, but then it falls into chaos. And sometimes it takes time, in other words, to cultivate attention. And what Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche used to say is that when what's most important is consistent practice. And I think that's important because it's not just practicing once and then you get proficient. You have to practice again and again and again and again. And by practicing again and again and again, you gain this proficiency over time. And what's good about that is that while there may be some frustration in that you're not instantly proficient, this is because the human mind is very quick. The human mind's very, very quick. In fact, I joke around with people, if we could only harness the speed of the human mind, we would not need nuclear power or any kind of power. We would have all the power we needed if we could just harness the speed of human thought. But the fact of the matter is, we have to slowly get used to the idea of being observant of the mind. And that takes time. So what Khenpo Rinpoche said was just doing a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you can fit in your day, but do it every day and every day and every day and every day. If you can do that, you will get better results than you would get if you practiced for like an hour once a week. So this consistency, and the reason that this is because the reason consistency is important is because this is how our confusion is happening. Our confusion is happening day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. We're in this roiling, boiling confusion all day long, and meditation is just a short break from that. And so and yet the rest of our time we're training in the roiling, boiling mind. And so if we can consistently do a little bit of meditation, sort of establish ourselves, make a mark and actually say, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to do this. If we can claim our meditation seed and do it day after day after day, we will make more progress than if we don't. And what you'll notice is that over time, you'll notice a few things that will happen. One is that you'll notice that at first, you're going to feel like you're having lots of thoughts. But it's not that you're having more thoughts. It's that you're beginning to notice the thoughts you are having. And so what I can say is the good news about this is that if you're noticing you have a lot of thoughts, you are at what is called the first stage of shamatha. And so so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to show you a diagram about the 4 stages of shamatha, so you can kind of see a little bit about it. I'm going to see if I can make technology work for me. Good luck. Here we go. And do a screen share. Yep, there we are. Okay. This screen sharing is from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's book, Dharma Paths, by the Venerable Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. I will post a copy of this description. I will post a copy of this description either in the chat here, or I will send it to the organizers tonight, okay? So here are the 4 stages of Shine or Shamatha meditation. This is according to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. The first is waterfall, the first stage of meditation. There is tremendous activity going on in the mind, like water constantly pouring down in a waterfall. Don't feel discouraged. Don't feel disappointed. Now, he knows, and that's what's really funny, he knows we will feel discouraged or disappointed. But it's because we don't have instant proficiency. Remember, we're spending all of our day practicing the roiling, boiling mind. So just like one session of meditation or 2 or 3 or 20 or 80 or 100 is not going to give us instant proficiency. We have to be satisfied with making slow and steady progress. So now he's saying, don't feel discouraged or disappointed. Realizing that you have to work, which is usually that first moment of disappointment, like, oh, darn, I'm not going to be instantly proficient. Darn it. But still, once we get past that, realizing that you have to work, continue to practice without becoming annoyed or disappointed at the number of distractions. You should resolve to continue the meditation practice, neither encourage the thoughts nor try to suppress them, but simply work on coming back to the breath. This speaks about a skill that we're going to learn a little more about later. There are 2 skills being cultivated in the practice of meditation. One of them is called mindfulness, and the other one is called alertness. Sometimes alertness is called awareness, but that gets things a little confused. So we're just going to go with alertness, mindfulness and alertness. According to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, mindfulness is that continuous thread of knowing where you are and what you're doing, continuously being mindful of what you're doing. So as we cultivate attention, we're going to become more mindful, meaning we're going to be more conscious of what we're doing and intentional about doing it. Mindfulness is what allows us to both start and finish a task, even if it's a simple task, like washing the dishes or sweeping the floor. Mindfulness is what keeps us with the process and makes sure we do it right. Mindfulness is what allows us to wash the dishes and get all the dirt off. Because if we become unmindful and forget that we're washing dishes, we could even drop the dish. So mindfulness is the first skill we're learning. Second skill is this alertness. Alertness is that function of the mind that permits us to know when we are no longer mindful. Okay, so mindfulness is the first thing we're trying to cultivate, and alertness is the part of our mind that says, hey, by the way, you're not mindful right now. It notices. This alertness is the function of mind that notices when we're no longer being mindful. And the two go together. They help each other. Mindfulness brings about alertness, and alertness helps mindfulness. So these two skills are what we're learning. And so this is why he is saying here, realizing that you have to work, continue to practice. Without becoming annoyed or disappointed at the number of distractions, you should resolve to continue the meditation practice. In other words, you're not going to give up. Now, this is, of course, keeping in mind what I said earlier about Rinpoche's advice about the two kinds of meditators, the kind that starts out really where things go well and then it gets chaotic. That person actually does have to leave off their meditation before they become utterly frustrated. One of the Karmapas said, leave your meditation on good terms. Leave your meditation while you're still on good terms with it. And so that means that we do have to be pragmatic. We can't just like force ourselves to sit there and be chaotic and be upset. That's not useful. But neither can we push down our thoughts and try to suppress them, because he says neither encourage your thoughts nor try to suppress them. A lot of people, when they sit with a lot of tension. You've seen those videos, the fantastic fun videos of Mingyur Rinpoche teaching, and he gives the example of what he calls the impatient meditator. It's the person, he sits real stiffly with a scowl on his face. And he says, I'm practicing patience, don't bug me, So, and through this comedic display, he talks about the stiffness and tension that we can actually bring to our meditation seat. And what's cool is that guess who comes to our meditation seat? We do. And what we bring to our meditation seat is all of the confusion. Remember the roiling, boiling confusion? We bring all of that to our meditation seat. And we think we're going to fix it. But what actually happens is that first, all of our confusion tries to take over the meditation. We either get overly ambitious, or we get overly lazy, or something else. But what we're aiming for is equanimity. What we're aiming for is equanimity. We don't want to get too loose and just let our thoughts wander everywhere, And we also don't want to be so tight that we try to force meditation on ourselves or to force mental quiet. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche says, you should place your attention lightly on your breath. Just be light with your attention. He said, if you try to practice this attention too tightly, what will happen is you will actually have more thoughts, because tension in the body, anywhere in the body, promotes more thinking. So it promotes this sort of roiling, boiling. And so as a result, he says, just place your attention lightly. Somebody once asked Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, well, Rinpoche, how much attention? He said, oh, because they made him give a number. He said 25% of your attention should be on the breath. The other 75, just relax. Well, that's, but then some people really clamp down on that and say, oh, am I doing 25% or am I doing 50? I don't know, I'm confused. So I think Khenpo Rinpoche's approach of just lightly placing your attention and then over time figuring out what that is for you is probably going to be the best. A little bit of trial and error and adjustment is going to be helpful. Khenpo Rinpoche said the example is a cat. If you have a cat and you try to imprison that cat in a closet so they'll stay out of your hair, then the cat is going to go insane trying to get out. However, he said, if you put a nice warm basket of laundry in the closet and then leave the door open just a little bit, the cat will climb into the basket and fall asleep. So this is what he's meaning by this idea: neither encourage the thoughts nor try to suppress them, but simply work on coming back to the breath. So how is that, people understanding that so far? Any questions about that? I'm not able to monitor chat right now, so if anybody sees one in chat, let me know. While I'm screen sharing, it's a little hard. Okay, so that's the first. So if you're thinking, wow, I have lots of thoughts, guess what? You're at the first stage of shamatha. Good for you. You made it. If you think you have a lot of thoughts when you meditate, good for you. You're noticing, you're practicing that mindfulness and alertness. You're good. You're doing well. You're at the first stage. You're at least noticing your thoughts. Before you didn't even notice them. Second, meandering river in a valley. Second stage. Sometimes the valley is wide and the ground is level, so the water runs very smoothly. Sometimes there's a turn or the ground is uneven, so there's play and activity in the water. While thoughts are still arising and you still encounter distractions, they are not as frequent as they were at the beginning and are not as gross or powerful. You are not so shaken by distractions, but are able to come back to the breath quite easily. Sometimes you're able to follow the breath for some moments without distraction. Again, you are able to come back to a stretch of calm and tranquil mind, staying focused on the simple technique of following the breath. So I make a point of not using the word focus when I teach meditation. I'll kind of argue with the use of the word focus here, because you remain attentive to the technique. So that's the second stage. Things begin to improve, and you have some periods where you can have several breaths of attention. So what happens is you start out with this tiny period of attention that's followed by a big period of mental wandering. And then by continuously practicing the remedies, that period of distraction gets a little shorter and the period of attention gets a little longer. So that's success. If that period of attention gets a little longer and the period of wandering gets a little shorter, things are going well. This takes us to the third, which is the ocean with waves. This is the third stage of meditation. While most of the time the ocean is tranquil, once in a while, large waves arise and then settle back into the ocean. For a time, the ocean takes a rest. After a while, another wave arises and again, it goes back into the ocean. If you are able to maintain the awareness of following the breath most of the time, but once in a while, there are some distractions. At this point, there is not so much shakiness or uncertainty in your meditation practice. You begin to feel a sense of confidence and trust in yourself and in the practice. And this is where proficiency starts to become helpful, because you begin to get a sense of, okay, I know how to do this. Okay, I know how to follow the breath. Okay, I can bring my attention back when it wanders. And you begin to feel like you can coordinate the practice, because there are, I didn't even talk yet about the remedies for agitation and mental agitation and the remedies for sleepiness, but I'll get into that in this afternoon session. But what will happen is that eventually you'll be able to use your remedies really quickly and spend less time in the roiling, boiling mind and a little more time in the attentive mind. So what happens is that over time, you begin to feel a sense of confidence and trust in yourself and in the practice. A lot of people say, oh, I trust the Dharma. I just don't trust me. You know, I trust the Dharma to be good, but I don't trust that I'm a good person to follow it. But we aren't at first a good person in following our teachings and teachers, and we make mistakes continuously. But the more we practice, the more confidence we get, which also then speaks in favor of this steady day after day after day, practicing short periods of meditation every day and every day and every day. That consistency is what leads to this confidence. And then finally, the fourth stage of meditation is the windless, waveless ocean. As you continue to practice, the basic Shine or Shamatha meditation finally becomes stabilized, which is likened to a windless, waveless ocean. No matter how long you meditate, you can sit without distraction. There may still come subtle thoughts, but these do not take you away from following the breath. To reach this level of meditation requires consistent and diligent practice over a long period of time, going through the various stages. So that's a little bit of a discussion about the 4 stages of shamatha. And if anybody has a question, well, no, let's do a short meditation first. We'll just sit quietly for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll do more questions. So placing the body in the posture of meditation, whether you're sitting in a chair or sitting on the floor, and having placed your body in the posture of meditation, you form your motivation, which is to be of benefit to yourself and others. Then you begin by taking 1 deep breath, breathing out, and then letting your breath come and go naturally, placing your attention on the breath as it comes in and goes out. Okay, that's just a little bit of meditation. I just realized that it might be useful for me to talk about sleepiness and agitation now rather than do it this afternoon. So I'll just say a couple words about it. And then if you have questions, you can start typing them into chat. The teachings of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche on shamatha practice, as he teaches them in his book, Dharma Paths, talk about 2 problems that people develop in meditation. One is sleepiness, and the other is mental agitation. And he said that he gave little visualizations to help counteract these. When you're feeling sleepy, he said there's several things you can do. When you're sleepy, you can bring in fresh air. You can actually stand up, not to meditate, but just to refresh yourself. He said you can moisten your face with water. Whoop, I made my chat disappear. Oops, sorry, I have to give this to everyone. I'm still learning Zoom. So you can, when you're sleepy, you can bring in fresh air. You can also stand up. He said you can even sprinkle water on your face. You can do all of these kinds of things to sort of freshen you up again. But there's also a visualization you can do. And the visualization involves closing your eyes. And you can tip your chin up if you want to and not if you don't. But imagine that as your breath comes out, it goes up and away from you and into a shaft of light that's in space in front of you, that's leading away from you. And imagine that it goes into that shaft of light, and that when the breath comes back to you from the shaft of light, it comes in the form of white light, and that enters your body through the nostrils as you breathe, and that it illuminates your body with light. And then again, you breathe out into the shaft of light. And as you breathe back in, you imagine that breath returns to you in the form of light, and that light illuminates your whole body. Now, Khenpo Rinpoche said, only do this as long as you need to dispel the sleepiness. Don't try to do it for the rest of the session. You just need to use it as a short-term remedy. So that's how you work with sleepiness. Getting fresh air. Another thing is don't try to meditate too close to a big meal, and so on. And Rinpoche said, if you do all of these things, including the visualization of your breath going up into a shaft of light and having it return as light that illuminates you, he said, if none of those things work, he said, it's probably the time for you to break off the meditation and go take a nap. He said, you've got to be pragmatic about it. So that's how to work with sleepiness. Agitation, on the other hand, when your mind is like a old-fashioned pinball machine where it's going from bumper to bumper to bumper with this roiling, boiling. The thing to do when agitated is to do the opposite, which is to get warm if you're cold, and then to loosen your posture a bit. Just loosen up your posture a little bit. And you can actually also use a visualization. As you know, the antidote to sleepiness was to cast your attention upward and imagine your breath was going out and up. For the resolution of agitation, you continue to look downward, but you imagine that there's a shaft of darkness in front of you in the floor, and that it's like the basement. It's cool and it's dark. And you imagine that your breath goes into that space of darkness and coolness, and that as it comes up as darkness. And that he actually used this term. He said, you illuminate your body with darkness. Now, I know that doesn't exactly track, but what he's trying to get at is that it calms the agitation. Again, you imagine your breath goes out into the earth, into that dark shaft, into the earth, and that it returns from the dark shaft as darkness, and it fills your body, calming down the agitation. Again, you only do it for as long as you need to dispel the agitation. You don't do it for a long time. And then finally, if the agitation won't let go, he said it's time to break off the meditation. If your agitation won't let go, break off the meditation, go refresh yourself and try again later. So that's a little bit about sleepiness and agitation. And now I can turn attention to the chat, where the question is it necessary to rest in the breath? In Mingyur Rinpoche's book, Joyful Wisdom, it is suggested that one can rest in a variety of objects, such as sounds, memories, emotional states, and so on. Is this a different lineage of practice? The answer is yes, it actually is a different lineage of practice. And he's using the lineage of practice that he belongs to in order to explain different types of meditation. So it depends on the individual. I've actually met people who cannot meditate on breath awareness. It's just not, they're just not set up for it. When they become aware of their breath, they become overly aware and they actually get nervous. And so for that kind of person, the technique that Mingyur Rinpoche is describing in Joyful Wisdom is it's more of a technique that is associated with the fruition of shamatha than it is with the technique of shamatha. Technique is working on technique and getting proficient at placing your attention on something. And in his approach, you are actually able to be attentive to anything instantly and automatically. And it takes time for some people to approach that. For some people, the approach of being tethered to a single technique like breath awareness, or the alternate objects of awareness that we were given was to use a small stone or a pebble or a small stick, not quite the size of your finger, or to use a Buddha image on the table in front of you and let your attention rest, your eyes rest on the entire image of the Buddha. And then when your attention wanders from the image, to bring your attention back. But you also can use sound, as he's talking about. It's a little harder to use emotional states because it's hard for us to disengage from the story that's associated with the emotional state. But that is something that a person could do. I think of all of the objects he gives, the one that I like the best is sound. Because especially if you have a sound that's continuous, you can place your attention on the sound. I have a little motor that runs in my heating system and the fan is on. So I can hear it all the time through the registers in the floor. Mingyur Rinpoche indicates you could also use music. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, he was a little dubious about music. And the reason he was dubious, he says it's very hard not to become emotionally involved in music and to only hear the sound and only be attentive to the sound without thinking about the content. But because Mingyur Rinpoche teaches it as a technique, I think it's worth a try for anybody who wants to do it. But I think that that at first it's better to stick with one technique that seems to work for you, and then stick with that as your main technique. And then branch out, trying other techniques after you become proficient at the first one. The other option is, let's say you're a different kind of person and you can't connect to breath awareness. Well, then you need to try all of these different techniques. You need to try them all until you can find one that will really work for you. So there's two approaches. One is for people who instantly take to one technique or another. They instantly take to breath awareness, or they instantly take to mantra awareness, being aware of the recitation of a mantra, or they instantly take to a visualization meditation, or they instantly take to just being aware of sound. But if you don't instantly take to something, then you do need to do quite a bit of experimentation to find out what you can do and what will help you to tether your attention. And just because this is a different lineage of practice doesn't mean it's not proper. It just means it's different. And so I'm teaching the way my teacher taught me, which was to start with breath awareness and then to go through these 4 stages of shamatha: the waterfall, the meandering stream, the ocean with waves, and the windless, waveless ocean. That was how I was trained as a way of noting your progress in shamatha. But Mingyur Rinpoche's approach is fantastic for specific individuals. And for those specific individuals, they take to it instantly. It's like they knew it in a previous lifetime, which is probably what this is mostly about. It's mostly about the techniques that we have worked with in the past in our previous lifetimes. When we see them and hear about them, we instantly like them and instantly want to try them. And so, so you can try any of these approaches. I hope that's helpful. There's time for one more question. If there's one more question out there, I don't see anything in chat, so you can unmute your microphones and ask a question on audio. Okay, hearing no questions on audio, then we'll sit quietly to end our session this morning. And we'll sit and rest our minds briefly in meditation as part of our dedication of our merit. Okay, I'm going to if people did not receive, I'm going to try to attach a file. The diagram of the 9 stages. I want to see if I can find it really quick for you. Yeah, here it is. Okay, good. And so this will be the drawing that we're going to use during the afternoon session. And you can come back to the same Zoom address at 1 o'clock, and we'll get back together and talk about the next section. So dedicating, oh, I see a person with their hand up. Yes. Okay. Oh, I thought there was a question. Sorry. Okay. So we dedicate this merit to all sentient beings, making the aspiration that all beings are free from suffering and they come to happiness. I'll recite the short prayer in English. Through this merit, may all beings obtain the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Yeah, thank you. And I'll be ending the broadcast or the webcast now, and I will start it again at the top of the next hour. So thanks, everyone. Everybody has the same Zoom. It'll be exactly the same Zoom coordinates. So
Great.
see you real soon.
Thanks, Lama Kathy.
Okay. Om Mani Padme Hum.